In Caribbean waters once known for peace, warships now glide like shadows. Missiles have already been fired. And the CIA, it's officially inside Venezuela. The U.S. calls it a fight against drug cartels. But the truth runs deeper. Because this isn't just about cocaine routes or criminal gangs. This is a new kind of standoff, one that could pull the entire Caribbean into its storm. This is the U.S. versus Venezuela Showdown, how it could hit the Caribbean. The fuss nobody voted for it started quietly. Then, in just weeks, the world's most powerful navy appeared off our southern shores. By late August 2025, the United States had launched its largest Caribbean military operation in 3 decades, 8 warships, thousands of Marines, and F-35 fighter jets stationed in Puerto Rico. Washington called it a counter-narcotics mission. But the weapons told a different story. Missile destroyers, submarines, amphibious assault ships, these weren't built to chase speedboats. Then came the first shock. 5 lethal strikes on small vessels in the Caribbean Sea, killing at least 27 people. The U.S. said they were narco-terrorists. Venezuela said they were civilians. The world said, hold on. What's really happening here? And then, October 15th, 2025, a moment that stunned diplomats everywhere. The U.S. president looked into the cameras and confirmed the CIA has been authorized to operate inside Venezuela. From that second, the Caribbean's peace was no longer guaranteed. A history written in oil and fire. To understand this crisis, we need to rewind a century. The story of the U.S. and Venezuela began with oil, sweet crude that fueled both nations' ambitions. For decades, American companies drilled, shipped, and profited. Venezuela became one of the world's richest countries. But in 1999, one man flipped the script, Hugo Chavez. His Bolivarian revolution threw out U.S. influence, raised oil royalties, and built a movement that called Washington an empire. Chavez called George W. Bush the devil at the United Nations, and Washington never forgave him. When Chavez died in 2013, his protege, Nicolas Maduro, took over. The oil money dried up, corruption spread, and the economy collapsed. Millions fled. The United States imposed crippling sanctions, accused Maduro of narco-terrorism, and even recognized opposition leader Juan Guaido as Venezuela's rightful president. That was the moment the relationship turned from rivalry to hostility. Now, decades of bitterness are exploding just miles from our islands, the new front line, Caribbean waters. By September 2025, the U.S. began calling Venezuela's gangs designated terrorist organizations. Then came the strikes, missiles tearing through the night, boats burning on open water. The Pentagon said these were cartel vessels carrying cocaine, but no evidence was ever made public. Analysts noticed something else. The U.S. was using a wartime legal loophole. It declared a non-international armed conflict with drug cartels, meaning it could use military force without Congress, without trial, without warning. That's how criminal suspects became unlawful combatants, and how the Caribbean suddenly became a battlefield for a war that no one declared. International law experts warned, if America can do this here, what stops China or Russia from doing the same tomorrow? The precedent is terrifying, and the targets dangerously close. The Caribbean's balancing act. The U.S. calls it necessary action. Venezuela calls it aggression. But where does the Caribbean stand? For decades, CARICOM declared the region a zone of peace. Yet, as missiles fell and warships gathered, that principle began to crack. Trinidad and Tobago's Prime Minister, Kamla Persad-Bissessar, praised the strikes, saying she had no sympathy for traffickers and the U.S. should kill them all violently. But others, like Barbados's Prime Minister, Mottley, took the opposite view. At the United Nations, she urged Washington and Caracas to talk, not fight. She warned, "We cannot afford another war in our hemisphere." Because in any war between the U.S. and Venezuela, the Caribbean would be ground zero for fallout, economic, humanitarian, and political. The human cost of power. If you think this is just politics, think again. The Caribbean lives and dies by tourism. Last year alone, over 34 million visitors arrived. But what happens when global headlines scream, "War in the Caribbean"? Flights get cancelled, cruise ships reroute, hotel bookings vanish. In a single week, 40% of regional tourism could evaporate. Economies would buckle, jobs would vanish, food prices would spike. And through it all, the same question would haunt every island. Why must we always pay for someone else's war? What if the shots spread? Here's the truth. No one wants to say out loud. The U.S. now has over 10,000 personnel deployed across the southern Caribbean. Venezuela has activated its Russian-made S-300 missile systems and placed millions of militia members on standby. All it takes is one misfire, one stray missile, to ignite a full-scale war. And make no mistake, Venezuela still sits on the world's largest oil reserves. If fighting cuts off that supply, global prices could soar 20% overnight, driving up gas, food, and electricity costs from Kingston to Kingston upon Thames. Even the United States would feel the blow. But the Caribbean? We would be the collateral damage between superpowers with too much pride to stand down. CARICOM, at a crossroads. The crisis has exposed a dangerous truth. CARICOM is divided when unity matters most. Half the bloc fears U.S. retaliation if they speak out. The other half fears losing sovereignty if they stay silent. A united CARICOM voice, calling for dialogue, de-escalation, and international mediation, could be the region's most powerful defense. Because when small states act together, they can still shift the tone of global diplomacy. CARICOM must decide. If the Caribbean stays silent, history will remember that silence as consent. The choice is ahead. There's still time. CARICOM leaders can push for emergency talks, backed by neutral nations like Norway or Mexico. They can work with the UN and the Organization of American States to rebuild dialogue. They can prepare for refugee inflows, food shortages, and economic shocks before it's too late. But the clock is ticking. The missiles are already flying, and the Caribbean's cherished image as a sea of peace is fading fast. Because if this spiral continues, our region won't just lose tourists, it will lose its identity, its stability, and maybe even its safety for generations to come. In the Caribbean, our survival has always depended on peace. If you believe our region deserves to be heard, deserves to be safe, and deserves peace, subscribe now to this channel, Impacting Jamaica. Your voice might be small, but together, we are mighty.